so I've got, all I have to do is reattach the oarlocks. But the thing is they had to, the old screws, when I epoxied it, the old screws had to be drilled out. And that just has created a whole bunch of headaches.
Yeah.
So now instead of how it was originally constructed, I have to like get new hardware, and so I gotta wait for that.
Recording in progress.
We're all here. Flies.
All right, it's 1:30, August 1st. I'd like to call the Board of Adjustments meeting to order. Can we get a determination of quorum, please?
Rob Pierce,
Here?
Don Christensen,
Here.
Peter Gashon,
Here.
Kathy Julian,
Here.
Leo Harishny.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you all please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can we have the ethics law announcement, please?
Thank you. Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or person coming before the board today, you've received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest, you have a commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, or you provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. You must furthermore abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting. This meeting is being held in person and via Zoom. To attend via Zoom, please log into the Zoom webinar using the link on the agenda. You can also join the meeting by typing zoom.us into your computer browser, clicking Join a Meeting on the website, and entering this meeting ID 872-1567-5749. Alternatively, you can join the meeting via telephone only by calling 1-669-900-9128 and entering this same user ID and pressing pound. If you'd like to provide public comment via Zoom, please utilize the raise hand feature during any public comment period. To provide public comment via telephone only, press *9 to raise hand and *6 to mute, unmute.
Thank you. Can we have the appeal procedure, please, Mr. Lloyd?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have two appeal procedures to read.
Okay.
The first one is the typical for most discretionary applications. Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and qualify as an agreed person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-3610 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee. The second appeal are for appeals to this board. So this is the process. A written order of the Board of Adjustment's decision shall be prepared, executed by the Board of Adjustment Chair, and filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and a copy of the order shall be served on the appellant. The appellant has the right to appeal the written order by filing a petition for judicial review in the 2nd Judicial District Court for the state of Nevada within 25 days from the date the order is mailed to the appellant. Per Washoe County Code, Section 110-910-15I6, when a petition for judicial review is filed, the court rules shall govern the proceeding. This judicial review is in lieu of an appeal to the Board of County Commissioners as authorized by NRS 278-310-3B.
Thank you. I'd like to open up public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
We do. I have Roger Edwards.
Please state your name for the record, and the floor is yours, sir.
I'll do that. Roger Edwards for the record. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Roger Edwards, 50-year resident. I had, I don't know how many years in service, 12 years as a commissioner, and over 20 years I was board of North Valley CAB. You know, development is tough enough without making it harder. And, you know, the county, while it maybe has good intentions, sometimes some of the act of the county, such as sponsoring $250,000 or more to the General Improvement District of Gerlach, if that's what happened, could be construed as being an unlawful act because the county can't back development from an individual, and the GID is not a development entity, and they should not have been sponsored. But somehow or other, they got lots and lots of money that I know they didn't have. They're just a little tiny town out in the middle of nowhere. They got lots of money to pay a developer to lay up a new plan for a community that they wanted to build. Now, I don't know where that money came from. I don't care. But you know, when somebody else calls it out and calls out the fact that the GID in Gerlach has no business doing development anyway, that's not their charter. And they should be, somebody should be looking at the details of what's going on. Now, you know, I don't know who it was. I don't have any of the details. I'm just guessing here. But you know, the county has enough things to stay busy with. They don't need to be doing this kind of crap up at Gerlach. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, please enter my comments into the permanent record.
I'm Gary Schmidt.
All right, Mr. Schmidt, floor is yours. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, board members. For the record, Gary Schmidt. I do own substantial property in Gerlach. I own 120 acres contiguous to the town, or the community. The community is only 100 acres. Just to further explain what Mr. Edwards was talking about, the Gerlach GID attempted to develop some of their surplus property into a residential, commercial, and industrial park to compete with the private sector. Totally illegal outside their charter, in violation of state law, and the county was a co-conspirator in it. They gave them $250,000 of COVID money, relief money. I and about 50 citizens in Gerlach, and there's only 105 citizens there, got that stopped. But it developed some animosity against me by the current GID board members, or at least 3 of them. There is an election coming up in November, and I hope all 3 of them are replaced. But anyway, that's the basis of an action you're going to hear later today, in that the GID, a member thereof, filed a frivolous, retaliatory, nonsense complaint against some of my property in there. But moving to another subject, you have over 500 pages for an exhibit for item 10D. And there's 10 open meeting law complaints already filed. I know there's 4 or 5 more on the way, having to do with the hearing on July 8th, which was continued to today. I'm not going to address those later. I'm going to stay focused on the issue of this nonsense, BS, little code infraction contrary to the law that was filed. But for general background reference, those complaints will be followed up on, and they all have to do with NRS 241-020, Section 8, 9, and 10, which says that anybody is entitled to a complete copy of the record on any agenda item before any public body. That includes all supplemental materials. it's not happening. There's also an issue with some materials are being filed by the county, not only just as DVDs or thumb drives, but in links to sites that you can't download and get a copy. And this is in violation of basically the open meeting law. And that will be addressed in other forums. I won't be addressing those later today. But thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
No further public comment in chambers, and I see no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment. We'll move on to item number 6, nominations of the chair and vice chair among us for another year. I would like to stay at chair if possible, but it's up to you guys. So I'd like to open up the chair nomination first.
Peter Gashon for the record. I think we're in fine hands with both Chair Pierce and Vice Chair Christensen. If they'd like to stay on, I'd like to nominate both.
I would like to second that.
Leo Harishny for the record. I will also support both members in their positions as they are currently.
Are we allowed to do that both at the same time? Okay, we got to, thank you. You got a motion and a second and a third. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Right on. Okay, that moves us on to item number 7, approval of the August 1st agenda. I would like to mention that item 10B, the Minogue expansion case, has been asked for a continuance until November. So that one we will not be hearing tonight. But other than that, everything else is a go. Can I get a motion to approve as written with that one exception?
Leo Harishny for the record. I move that the agenda be, the minutes be accepted as entered.
Oh, that's agenda. Yeah, it's agenda. Okay, so we got a motion to accept the agenda as written with the removal of 10B, just to be clear. Do I have a second?
Kathy Julian, for the record, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Next is approval of the June 14th draft minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at those? Do we have any changes or anything that somebody would like to address, or can I get a motion to accept them? Okay.
Kathy Julian. For the record, I move to accept the draft minutes from July 8th.
No, June 14th first.
Oh,
June
I'm sorry.
14th first, sorry.
June 14th.
Okay, I got a motion, I have a second.
For the record, Don Christensen, I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Oh, sorry, any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. It's moving on to 9. Now it's the July 8th draft minutes. Does anybody have anything they want to change? Does everything look okay? Can I get a motion to approve those?
Peter Gashon for the record. I'd move to approve the July 8, 2024 draft minutes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Leo Harishny, I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. All right, that moves us on to item number 10, public hearing item. It's amendment of conditions, case number WAC 24-0007 via Monopole, third extension of time for WSUP 19-003. Mr. Lloyd, please announce.
Sure. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an amendment of conditions to extend the approval of special use permit case number WSUP 19-0003 a third time for 2 additional years until June 6, 2026. The original approval was for a new wireless cellular facility consisting of a 150-foot high monopole structure, equipment shelter, outdoor generator, and LP tank. Representing Washoe County in this matter is Senior Planner Kat Oakley.
Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. So this, as was mentioned, is a third extension of time request and amendment of conditions for an approved monopole wireless facility in the Via area. Here is the overhead showing that parcel. So it's located on the south side of Dugway Road in Via, and here is a zoomed out image which shows some of the roads out there. It's very far north in Washoe County. The parcel is a BLM parcel. It's about 774 acres, the parcel in general. And then the area and the rest of the parcel are generally undeveloped. This is the third extension of time request, so it would move the expiration date of the special use permit to June 6th, 2026. WSUP 19-0003 was the original approval SUP, and it's for a 150-foot high monopole structure and then the necessary surrounding equipment. Here's just an elevation view of that proposed monopole. The original SUP was approved in June of 2019, and then in April of 2021, there was an approval for a 1-year extension of time. There was a subsequent approval in 2022 for a 2-year extension of time, and then that brings us to today, which is third request. There are a couple reasons for these extensions of time. So first, 2019, the original approval was right before COVID, and so there were some delay impacts from that. But then subsequently, this site is in sage grouse habitat, and it is on federal land, and so there are regulations on sage grouse habitat from the Nevada Division of Wildlife. There's a sage grouse credit program and a mitigation program for habitat that is disturbed, and so that's the process that the applicant is currently going through. They did look for, because of the costs and time involvement of this process, look for other viable sites for the coverage for this cell tower. But after finding none, are proceeding with the necessary scientific evaluation to get the sage grouse mitigation credits and then to go through that process. And so that's what this third extension of time would really be for. There have been no significant changes to the situation, and so it's staff's assessment that the original evaluation remains valid and the extension of time reasonable. However, also recognizing that this is the third extension of time, the original approval was in 2019, and so any subsequent extensions of time could reasonably merit a new complete review and application, because that really gets to the longer period of time that we tend to approve SUPs for and approve extensions for. A lot can change in 6 to 8 years. So right now we are recommending approval on this. And if there would be a future request, that would maybe merit more consideration. 10 agencies did review this extension of time request, including all of the agencies that had conditions on the original application, particularly the Nevada Division of Wildlife. No agencies responded with concerns. Staff did notice during this review that there were some conditions from Truckee Meadows Fire that did not get attached to the original action order or any of the subsequent action orders. And so with the agreement of the applicant, those conditions will be added into that action order now with the appropriate updates to reference the current versions of the fire code. 39 property owners were noticed within a 22,000-foot radius. And staff can make all 5 required findings for approval as detailed in the staff report. And so are recommending approval with conditions. The updated condition would be that extension of time to a June 6, 2026 expiration and the addition of the accidentally omitted fire conditions. And that is all I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then a representative of the applicant is also here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Thank you, Kat, for the presentation. Good afternoon, Commissioners. No, I don't have a presentation because I think Kat covered everything just now. Basically, yes, the sage grouse is a very expensive route and timing, and to do the study is a very limited short time frame, which is April 15th through June 30th. So, yes, when I was here last, I think it was mid to late May, so it was almost too late at that time to even get the study in the year of 2022. And then with finding the cost of to do the study and the credits and debit system, it was something that ComNet had to take back into a business case, for the cost. It wasn't originally, that amount was not factored into their budget, and so they're having to go back, factor it into the budget, and move forward from there. So if we receive approval today, they would be looking to get with the environmental firm in January of 2025. That way, the environmental firm can get all applications in. And then hopefully, weather permitting, during that time frame, there's no delays or issues where they can actually do the study and then go from there. And just seeing if anyone had any further questions.
I'm sorry, you said your name was Stacy?
Julie Kreckler,
Oh,
I'm with
Julie.
CIS Communications, representing ComNet Nevada.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment? This time I'd like to open up public comment.
There's no public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Okay, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Does anybody have any questions, or do we have any discussion?
I'm very comfortable with this.
Go ahead.
For the record, Don Christensen, normally, I'm kind of notorious for not wanting to, quote, kick the can down the road. And I read your the staff report, Kat, and found it to be very enlightening. It wasn't as straightforward as one might think. 150-foot monopole out in the middle of nowhere. But sage grouse seem to be sensitive to a possibility of something, a predator nesting above their habitat. So I wholeheartedly agree that another 2 years is appropriate here. And the nature of your antenna and system is not strictly commercial. It's has a very, very good use.
Correct.
For fire.
The FirstNet emergency responder system. Yes.
First responders in that. So I wholeheartedly, after reading this thing, and coming to an understanding of what the state of Nevada, not just the feds, have done on the sage grouse, and I'm not going to go into the validity of that, but it seems almost crazy to hold up this important project for the silly, I won't say silly, but for the little birds. And I do have one question for you, though. I realize you guys explored other locations and were denied by the property owners. We're not granting this extension to the point where you're going to give up in these 2 years and
No, I mean.
make this a moot point?
They're proceeding, with all their budget approvals, that goes quite through a process itself, because it has to be economical feasible for the companies too.
Okay. As a layperson, I would have thought that the NDOW, the Nevada Division of Wildlife, would perhaps be the entity to conduct this survey. But you're telling us that no, it's a private contractor that you have to pay for.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, another weight on the scale of granting you this time, so that would be my thoughts on it. And I don't mean to take a lot of time on it, but I just read sage grouse and I got a little mad about it. EPA is not involved, I realize that. It's other agencies, and I commend your patience.
Yes.
And we're not going to, I believe we're not going to add more pain to your pain.
Okay, anybody else have any other comments or questions or anything? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'm happy to make the motion. I think, if I can find it here. Sorry. Okay. I move that giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve amendment of conditions case number WAC 24-0007 for CommonNet of Nevada with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effect on a military installation.
Kat, do we need to add something in there about the fire? No. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Leo Hiroshini for the record, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Have a good afternoon.
That brings us to 10C. Appeal of decision case number WSTR 21-0006, the STR appeal at 947 Incline Way, number 162. Mr. Lloyd, please announce.
Yes, this is for hearing, discussion, and possible action to affirm, modify, reverse, or remand a decision of the Washoe County Director of Planning and Building to reduce the appellant's short-term rental occupancy from 6 persons to 4 persons, which was based on a reduction in parking from 2 spaces to 1 space. The appellant is requesting an occupancy of 5 persons with 2 parking spaces. And my name is Trevor Lloyd. I'm the planning manager filling in for planner Katie Stark, who's on vacation. And she provided a very thorough staff report, I should say, to all of you. And in addition, I think she did her best to try to meet with as many of you as possible. The reason is the Board of Adjustment does not get to engage very often with the short-term rental program. It's a fairly comprehensive program that we have established within the last several years. We currently have 2 full-time permitting tech staffs, as well as 1 full-time code enforcement officer whose sole responsibility is the enforcement of short-term rentals. So it's a fairly it's a big program. I know the Planning Commission is very aware of it. The Board of Adjustment, however, doesn't have very many opportunities to deal with the short-term rental program, and for that reason, the analysis in the staff report was very thorough, as well as if you've had an opportunity to meet with staff beforehand to discuss the program. I think it's very beneficial for the review of this. Now, keep in mind, this is the very first appeal that we have received for the permitting of a short-term rental. There have been other appeals, however, that have gone straight to the Board of County Commissioners, I believe, but none for a Tier 1 short-term rental, which is 10 occupants or less. I say that because you may be anticipating more in the future, and so this will essentially act as the model as we move forward with any other appeals that come before this board. So. As I indicated, the request is to appeal the decision of the director to reduce the occupancy based on the limited number of parking spaces. It was originally approved for 2 parking spaces, and that has been reduced down to 1 space, which would allow for a maximum of 4 occupants. The applicants are asking for 1 additional occupant to go up from 4 to 5 persons. The property is located within the McLeod condominium complex at 947 Incline Way. Not sure if this is working. It is. Okay. And I apologize. There we go. All right, just give you a brief summary. The original STR, short-term rental STR permit was issued to Kathleen Magnani. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It was issued in 2021 for a maximum of 6 occupants based on the square footage of the unit as well as the number of parking spaces. During the review of the renewal permit, it was discovered that the unit was only assigned 1 parking space, and therefore the occupancy would need to be reduced to 4 occupants. The appellant is arguing that the most of the short-term renters that they have there are parents with children. And in those situations where there are 3 children and two parents, they can all arrive in 1 car. However, per section 110.319.10 of the Washoe County Code, the applicant must include evidence for the number of allocated parking spaces. The code clearly specifies that overflow parking within a condo unit does not count toward the required number of parking spaces. Section 110.319.15 specifies that in multi-unit complexes, parking must be designated parking spaces and limited to the number of spaces allotted to the specific unit. That 1 parking space is required for every 4 occupants, and that the inability to establish the appropriate number on site of parking spaces will limit the occupancy number. Section 319.15 specifies that the STR occupancy may be further limited based on the number of on-site parking spaces. In section, this is 110.319.15. The STR permitting program has been active, as mentioned, for about 3 years. There's currently 745 active STR permits in unincorporated Washoe County. I should state that about 95% of them are located in the Tahoe Basin. That would be Incline Village and Crystal Bay. And the remaining 5% are scattered throughout the Truckee Meadows in the unincorporated area. Following a number of parking-related complaints that we've been receiving in the Tahoe Basin, our code enforcement staff have been investigating the parking situation at a number of the condominium complexes, such as McLeod, in order to better understand what those issues are and have a better idea of the total number of spaces within those complexes. All right. So in doing so, there was a review of the McLeod condominium complex. Code enforcement staff determined that there were 32 units within this portion of McLeod, addressed at 947 Incline Way, and that there were only 12 open paved parking spaces for 32 units. All right, each unit within the McLeod complex has 1 garage space. Even though each space or each unit is granted 2 parking passes, there's simply not enough parking spaces for each unit to park 2 vehicles at any one time. Therefore, this unit must be limited to the garage space as their only established parking space for this unit to accommodate the STR permit. Now, just wanted to go through some of the appellant's arguments and contentions and provide a brief response. Starting with this first one, the appellant argues that that most of the guests are parents with children, typically 2 adults with up to 3 children, that can be accommodated within a single car. However, our code does not make any distinctions based on the age of the occupant. Therefore, we do not make exceptions whether an occupant is a child or an adult. All right, the next contention from the appellant is that the decision to reduce the occupancy from 6 to 4 was based on parking alone and no other factors. The response to that is yes, that is correct. The square footage of the unit would allow for the 6 occupants as originally approved, but the parking is also one of those factors that would limit the total number of occupants. And again, as I had mentioned, 1 parking space allows for up to 4 occupants. All right. The next one, the appellant states that no guests are allowed to park on the street or within easements. They all must park in a garage or in one of the 8 McLeod parking lots. Again, per code, overflow parking will not count toward the required number of parking spaces. All right. The next argument, the appellant states that each unit is assigned a single-car garage space plus 2 additional parking passes to be used in the outdoor lots. Oversized parking or vehicles will not fit inside of the garage and must park in the outdoor lots. The county's response is that paved parking spaces must be designated to a specific unit in order to meet the STR code requirements. All right, next one, the appellant argues that 99% of their guests are families with small children. Also, the unit was previously approved for 6 occupants. And they're just asking that original approval remain. The county's response is that the code is clear, that only one parking space, that one parking space is required for each 4 occupants, and there's no distinction based on age. Also, the parking space determination was made recently based on the recent investigation by our code enforcement staff, which identified the parking situation within the McLeod condominium complex. All right. Next one, the appellant argues that only about 30% of the owners live within the McLeod complex full-time. The response to that is that the occupancy determination was based on the strict code requirements, and these requirements cannot be modified on a case-by-case basis. All right, next one, according to the appellants, their greatest argument is that there is plenty of parking within the complex to accommodate the additional occupancy requested. The response from the county, again, the occupancy calculation is based on the code requirements. There are only 130 paved assigned parking spaces with a total of 256 condo units. Finally, the appellant is asking if there have been any STR parking violations within the complex at this point, and whether or not that would have any bearing on this decision. The response from the county is whether or not there are parking violations is not a factor in the calculation that staff uses to determine the maximum occupancy. That concludes staff's presentation. We offer the following motion for your consideration, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have at this time. And I don't know if the applicant is in.
Available via Zoom.
They're on Zoom, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is the applicant online? Would they like to make a presentation?
Kathy, this is Recording Secretary Adriana Albran. If you could please unmute and share your screen so we can see your presentation. Kathy, I see you joined as a panelist. If you would please unmute.
Technical difficulties, sorry.
No worries, we can hear you.
Okay, finally I'm in and able to speak because I had to join differently. I'm gonna start my video as well. If I can. Okay. Hello to the board. Do you have my presentation or am I presenting it from my screen?
It'll be easier if you present from your screen so you can control the speed at which you move through your slides.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
And can you please state your name for the record, and can we start the clock over again, please?
Of course.
Absolutely. My name is Kathleen Magnani Hernandez, and I am the owner at 947 Incline Way. I'm hoping you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, perfect. So as you know, based on the staff report, I am appealing that decision that was reducing my occupancy down from 6 to 4. As you heard earlier, the habitable space, which originally governed the number of guests that STRs could have in my unit, was 6 based on habitable space, and I was allowed the 2 parking spaces as I provided all of the documenting details that showed that I had at least 2 spaces. As of this past June, when I went to reapply, I found that we were lowered to 4 guests based on STR parking standard number 3, which says 1 parking space is required for every 4 occupants. I'm still requesting an occupancy of 5. We actually don't want 6 people in our unit, and I'm requesting 2 parking spaces. The reason that I am requesting an occupancy of 5 is, although it says that you must have 1 parking space for every 4 guests, it does not say that if you only have 1 parking space, you may only have 4 guests. 4 guests can occupy my living space, so can 5. And 5 people can arrive in 1 car. I understand that the county is not specifying the difference between adults and children, but if the parking space is the standard that we are using as occupancy limits, almost all cars can accommodate 5 people. Where this eventually, where the number of 4 came from was they arrived at this because they did a study and they saw that 4 occupants was the average number during the summer months, which is the high season months in Klein Village. Well, an average indicates that there's some cars that have more than 4 and there's other cars that have less than 4. So an average of 4 doesn't mean only 4. And that's where that code or that STR parking standard came from originally. Try to. I'm struggling with moving my slides. Okay, thank you. I need to go forward, not backwards. Okay, my slides are struggling.
Kathy, Recording Secretary Adriana Brown here. Are you using your the arrow keys on your keyboard?
I wasn't, but I will.
Yeah, that'll help.
Okay, thank you for that
You're
helpful
welcome.
hint. So I'm suggesting, although habitable space allows 6 guests in my short-term rental, I'm requesting 5 adults. We don't want 6 guests at all. I'm challenging the soundness of the regulation that 1 parking space is required for every 4 occupants. The standard should be 1 car per designated space. Or it could also possibly state that 1 parking space is required for every 4 adult occupants. Now it's moving too quickly. Sorry about my presentation skills. So my request number 2 is to be granted 2 parking spaces as I was originally. Parking standard 2 says all parking spaces must be improved to Tahoe Regional Planning standards, developed on site within the property boundaries, dedicated specifically for parking, and in multi-unit complexes, parking must be designated to parking spaces. I have a garage that is allocated to my unit. I have 2 additional parking passes allotted to my unit for the outdoor lots, and both parking passes have my unit number on them. Under parking standard 2, all parking spaces must be improved to Tahoe Regional Planning standards. In McLeod, all parking spaces are TRPA approved. Developed on site within the boundaries, in McLeod, all parking spaces are on site and do not encroach on side streets, public streets, or other private property. Dedicated specifically for parking, there are 134 dedicated outdoor parking spaces within 8 lots. And in multi-unit complexes, my unit 162 has a garage and 2 additional parking spaces allotted to it. So incorrect statements that were in the Board of Adjustment staff report. There are 6 addresses for McLeod, that is correct. Each address includes its own contained group of condominium buildings with a garage for each of those units and several unassigned paid parking spaces, that is correct. These separate addresses do not have driveways or roads that connect them internally. That is incorrect. As there are paved pathways between all 8 clusters in McLeod's, CARD cannot access the pathways, but people can. So if parking in another cluster other than where my unit is located, I can walk to my unit on pathways. My unit is located at 947 Incline Way, which includes units 161 to 192. That's correct. There are 12 open paved parking spaces at this address. That is correct. These calculations show that each of the 32 units at 947 Incline Way has less than 1 paved parking space available. That's incorrect. We may park in any of the 8 McLeod parking lots. So yes, true that my cluster of units 161 to 192 has 12 spots, but there are 7 other clusters which I could or my guests could park. There are 256 units at McLeod Condominium Complex. All owners have garages and are expected to use their garage for parking. So that's 256 parking garages. Additionally, there are 134 outdoor spaces for owners to park vehicles, and that includes vehicles that are oversized that don't quite fit in garages. So if we add those two together, there's 390 parking spots. I actually went back after I did my appeal and looked at the Washoe County Assessor's Office data. There are 15% of McLeod owners that live there year-round. So there are not 256 units occupied ever at McLeod. Parking data that was taken, and I am the co-chair of the McLeod Parking Committee, shows that even on the very busiest weekends and holidays, McLeod parking lots are not 100% full. I have 2 graphs that are probably going to be very difficult for you to see. Memorial Day weekend, and the only column that I'd like you to, or bar part that I would like you to pay attention to is the blue one, because we're taking data on people that have parking tags and people that don't as well. But the blue one shows occupancy rates. So over Memorial weekend, the highest occupancy rate was about 75%. Over the 4th of July week and weekend, we got very, very close to 100%. We had parking data taken at 3 different times every single day for 4 days, and never got to 100% out of all 8 parking lots. Some of those parking lots did reach 100%, but all 8 never reached 100% at any time. So you've seen this in the staff report. The blue buildings show the McLeod buildings, and yellow shows the parking lots. And all 8 parking lots can be used by any McLeod owner. I am giving you this data, but I also included it in your board packet. It's very small, tight bars, but it shows you for specific clusters. Each cluster is a different color, and it does show that some of the clusters during that 4th of July week did reach 100%, but many of them did not. And really, that is the whole point. The most busy time at the McLeod complex is during the 4th of July. So granting my short-term rental 2 parking spaces, it says, in extraordinary and limited circumstances within the Tahoe Basin, the Planning and Building Division Director is authorized to consider reducing or relocating the required parking spaces in circumstances where the property owner has provided sufficient evidence that the request is warranted and will not unduly impact surrounding properties. McLeod is a private is private property, and parking in McLeod's lot does not impact Incline Village streets in any way. I know that is a big thing with short-term rentals in Incline. McLeod's parking does not impact Incline Village streets in any way. McLeod's parking lots are for McLeod parking pass holders only, and we monitor that. I am allotted 2 parking passes for my unit. On 7/1, I received an answer to my public records request. I asked for the number of parking violations for McLeod STRs. I specifically wanted all the short-term rentals in McLeod and how many parking violations have occurred. My response said that there were 4 complaints, but none of them progressed to a code enforcement violation. So we do not have parking complaints happening in McLeod. In the Planning Commission staff report on short-term rentals that was presented to the County Commissioner on January 7th, 2020, the staff stated that the review of successful STR programs around the country led them to identify several guiding principles. They included establishing a program that created simple, fair, and enforceable standards for STRs that balanced competing interests. An ordinance that limits parking to 4 occupants based on the average number of passengers per vehicle is not fair to STR owners who would otherwise be legally permitted to house more occupants. McLeod is private property, and parking in McLeod does not hit or exceed 100% even on the busiest of holidays, such as the 4th of July. Parking in McLeod is by permit only, and I have been allotted 2 parking permits for my unit. My STR guests have never had to park outside of McLeod, encumbering the Incline community. I know what all the STR regulations say, and I've followed all those regulations since day 1 3 years ago, including paying my $836.12 to appeal this decision. I understand you are all trying to follow the code, and those codes keep changing. And I'm citing the code amendments for a short term that just changed once again. I know STRs are not popular in Incline, and it seems regulations are becoming tighter and tighter. The voices of the anti-STR folks are louder than the STR folks who are trying to do the right thing. Follow all the permitting requirements and regulations and pay their fees. Even the code enforcement officer, Steve Oriole, said to me, if you don't like it, you can just give up your STR permit. I don't like a lot of things, but fairness is my button. It is completely unfair to regulate occupancy for an STR based on parking in a private community, McLeod, that does not impact the rest of Incline Village. To base parking on an average number of people per car in the summer is unfair, as most cars seat 5 people and would occupy only 1 parking space. It is completely unfair to say that only my garage can be counted as parking in McLeod when our HOA says otherwise. The governing body of a multi-dwelling community should be the body that determines the parking, not Washoe County. Although I really feel that the cards are stacked against me, I'm asking you to please consider my time, effort, and all the evidence I have presented and grant me an occupancy of 5 guests and 2 parking spaces. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any public comment on this?
There is no public comment in chambers, and on Zoom, there are no hands raised.
Okay, we'll close the public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion, questions. Do you guys have any questions, discussions?
I just have, Kathy, Julie, for the record, I have a question for, I guess, Trevor. What does it take to get from a complaint to a code enforcement violation? What are the steps there? The applicant mentioned that there were 4 complaints and no code enforcement violations, but what are the steps that it takes to get there?
Chad's going to come down and answer that. I know it can be involved. We do need confirmation of the violation itself, but I'll let Chad answer that.
Thanks, Trevor. Chad Giesinger, Planning Manager for the Code Enforcement Program, Community Services Department. Thanks for the question. Well, this hasn't been explained yet, but we actually have a hotline. We have a third-party vendor called Host Compliance that identifies listings and tracks STR operators, and that's one of the ways we are able to find out people are operating without a permit. But one of the other things Host Compliance does is it provides a complaint hotline that people can call 24 hours a day, and then our code enforcement officer monitors that hotline. The hotline allows evidence to be submitted, but almost 9 out of 10 times when we get a parking complaint, and they're very common, we don't have sufficient evidence uploaded into the complaint hotline. It's very difficult to tie a specific vehicle to a specific unit, especially in a condo complex. So we haven't really brought many parking violations in general, regardless of the location of the STR, because it's just very difficult to get proper evidence. So what the code requires is a time and date stamped photo of the violation. A lot of times we don't get that. But even if we do get that, it requires the complainant to file a witness statement, since the code enforcement officer didn't personally see someone, for example, park on the street and then walk into the short-term rental unit, right? So that's why most of these complaints haven't moved on to a violation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Peter.
Trevor, if someone shows up in a Suburban or a long bed truck and can't fit in the garage, are they automatically in violation of the parking standards by using the open lots at McLeod?
No, they're not. Again, it's anticipated that they are to park within the garage, but there's going to be situations, as mentioned in the staff report, that vehicles, they just won't fit in the garage. And so we don't have an enforcement staff that have the resources to enforce such matters. But in those situations, no, as far as I'm aware, they can park in the overflow parking. But what it does do is it limits the overall occupancy to 4 units when the application for the permit is submitted.
Yeah, I understand the distinction between the application requirements,
right.
But you're saying you don't have code enforcement resources, but is it a de facto violation of code to not park within the garage?
I do not believe so. I'm looking at, is it a violation to park in the open space?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Calling on my code enforcement expert here.
Hi, Chad Giesinger, Planning Manager, again for the record. Technically, you're correct, yes. They must use the space, and that's the whole point of having an assigned space to the unit. And the reason for that is simple. It's so that when an STR renter shows up, they're guaranteed to have that one space, and so that they don't go park on the street or in somebody else's spaces. This is a bit of a controversy with the condo complexes because they're used to having family, friends, guests come and be able to use the overflow parking, and indeed that's what that overflow parking is for. But when it comes to an STR permit, which is a privileged permit, and the impacts of STR renters and over-occupancy in too many cars, we have to have a dedicated parking space for them to use. So in reality, would they be getting a penalty notice or a code violation case opened against them? Probably not, but technically, yes, it would be a violation to not use the allocated space. Yeah, so for example, if my code enforcement officer happened to be driving through right at the time that they parked in that space and went up to the unit and they were able to observe that, then yes, they could open up a case based on the code.
Interesting, okay. Another one, Trevor, if you don't mind. Do you know if, I think McLeod, I was looking at the records, was built in '91. Do you think that a complex of that size, parked as it is, would be approved today? Would it meet current code on parking requirements?
I know that Tahoe has, they have some unique parking standards. I'd have to look at the parking criteria for a multifamily dwelling type of a facility like a condominium complex. I don't know what the current code says. I believe it's 2 parking spaces, one that is covered and the other that is not. But I'd have to go back and take a look at those standards. Quite honestly, we have not had very many condominium complexes within the last 20 years. Yeah, I could certainly look at code and get back to you on that question before this item is up.
And then just I think a curiosity down the same line of thinking, maybe the applicant would know, are there dedicated spots for snow storage at McLeod, or do you lose parking spaces in the winter as well?
We do not lose parking spaces. As a matter of fact, cars have to move so that snow can be removed from all of the outdoor lots, and snow storage goes elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, anybody else got anything? No? Sorry, I'm gonna confuse you, Trev. Well, I got a question for Trev. Hold on. So, where is it? It's 16, 17. There's I guess I should have been ready. I thought for sure somebody else was going to have something.
I got one more if you're looking.
Go ahead.
Peter Gishon for the record. I didn't mean to ask.
Here they are.
Have you talked to the applicant about a director's modification here? And I suppose I'm curious, maybe legal or you, is this board allowed to grant a permit for 5, or could that only be done by a director's modification?
I'm going to look at legal for that answer.
Yes, this board has the ability to affirm, reverse, or modify a director's decision.
We can modify it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So on page 10 of the staff report, 10, 11, 12, 13, it says it's all dated the same date, same time, same person, and they're all, maybe I'm missing some, short-term rental permits, but the maximum number goes from 4 to 3 to 6 to 6. Am I missing somewhat?
No.
What is that?
Yeah, this says, I believe that this particular short-term rental has gone through a number of different amendments. My understanding is that the very first permit was issued for 3. Following that, we changed the code to provide more flexibility. The 3 occupants was based on the internal square footage of the unit, not, regardless of the parking situation. The code had changed, providing more flexibility. Now we expanded not just the square footage, but 2 occupants per bedroom, plus the remaining habitable space, 1 additional occupant per 200 square feet. So that additional allowance allowed the applicant to request a higher occupancy to go from 3 up to 6. And at that time, we were under the impression, based on the passes, that there were 2 parking spaces. That determination has since been revised with the work that the code enforcement staff did in determining the available parking. But hopefully that answers the question. So it went from 3 up to 6 with the code amendment, and now back down to 4 specifically because of the parking. I hope I clarified that okay.
Yeah, why would they all have the same date on, though?
Same.
Yeah, they're applied 6/16 of 21, issued 6/16, expired 6/16 of 24, but they're, oh, I see. Okay, I got it. They all have different expiration dates.
Right.
Okay, I got you. Let's see. So this is a question for the applicant. On your parking passes, do they state your unit number?
Yes, they do.
So I would consider those assigned parking spots then, me personally. Okay. We're waiting for Trevor to clarify that for you.
I was looking up the parking provisions. It looks like it's a little complicated because it's based on the number of bedrooms per unit. For example, 2 bedrooms or fewer, it's 1 parking space. 3 bedrooms, it's 2 parking spaces. 4 more bedrooms, it's 2.5. So we would have to do a calculation, and it would be case by case. So hopefully that answers your question.
But on his question of the assigned, what is the definition of an assigned parking space? My understanding was that it had to be dedicated to that unit and not something that was open to the other 200 and some odd units that might be there.
Right.
256
Yeah.
units that are there.
Right. It is my understanding that each of the unit is granted 2 parking passes. Those are passes, those aren't necessarily assigned designated parking spaces. That is the distinction. And much for the reason for the early confusion from staff. That's what we were counting on as well. That has since been, an interpretation has been made that those are not designated spaces, those are simply parking passes.
One follow-up, Peter Gishan. I realize I only got half of my question answered. Was a director's modification contemplated here? Did staff recommend here or the modification process?
Right, and I do apologize. I'm filling in for Ms. Stark, who has had multiple conversations. I would ask the applicant if that discussion has been made with Ms. Stark, if that's okay with the chair.
Yeah, do you understand the question?
I understand it perfectly. Ms. Stark did not bring this up to me. I followed through and asked if I would be required to do a director's modification. And I asked for the director's modification link to the form. And again, this was the first step though, was to appeal to this board and pay my $800 and whatever dollars. To do a director's modification is another $400 and something dollars. And if I was going to be doing a director's modification, my question is, why would I be going through this appeal? That's just kind of the question that is circling in my head, is why would I be appealing here if I could just do a director's modification, which is about half the price?
If I may, and this may go back to Trevor, is the item that is agendized for consideration right now is hearing discussion and possible action to affirm, modify, or reverse the Washoe County Director's determination to reduce the permit. So that is the stage that, per the agenda, we appear to be at.
So just to understand, Kathy Julian for the record, it appears that there was a consideration. And I'm looking at page 8, the top of that, which says this authorizes the division director to consider reducing or relocating the required parking spaces in circumstances where the property owner has provided sufficient evidence that the request is warranted and will unduly impact surrounding properties. I was assuming this determination had been made, and that is why we are here.
That is certainly as it appears from the agenda and the items in the record.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
I have no more questions, but
Okay.
I do
We'll bring it
have
back to the
for
board.
discussion.
Yeah, I just brought it back
Okay.
to the board. Go ahead.
I just want to clarify on something. I toured the property this morning, and there were, of the 12 spots adjacent to those units, those 32 units, there were 4 empty spots there on a Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. My observation, and I base this on the fact that I have canvassed that area for various reasons, and I'm very familiar with McLeod, a family would not be going from one parking area to another, parking and carrying their things. It's a maze-like series of buildings. And I have found it difficult to navigate through there. So I don't think that's realistic to look at the total of 134 parking spaces for this unit. Basically, you've got 12 parking spaces for these 32 units, frankly. So that's just an observation based upon someone who lives there. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
Leo Harishny, for the record. I and my wife, we went up there and looked at the complex, and yeah, the parking between the garages being the size that they are, and that the tight nature of the parking area and the garage area and the overflow. Sure, it's possible that someone could park at another distant parking area and walk over there, but it doesn't seem to be likely or probable to me as a reasonable person looking at the situation. I think that it's reasonable to contest or have an issue with 4 or 5 persons per designated parking spot. But that, to me, would be the way that an applicant would go about this, is going back to whatever process it takes to change that standard from 4 to 6 to 5 to whatever. And given the parking garages and that parking situation, it's reasonable to assume that at various times that one designated parking spot will need to be in the overflow parking spot already for someone visiting.
Okay. Go ahead, boss.
For the record, Don Christensen, I agree with what we've discussed here so far, and it's pretty clear. But further clarify this, the association, the homeowner association, has issued more parking passes than there are parking spaces. And so in an imperfect world, I think that the statute for STR addresses that, and I think it's unreasonable to modify that or to consider a modification simply because the regulation here is simply stated assigned parking. And I think we need to have a strict interpretation of what is assigned parking. And this does not meet that standard.
Okay. My question is, what if, and I don't have approval to recommend this, but I'm just thinking outside the box, what if we only allowed 1 vehicle and 5 people? I don't know. I would have to ask the applicant if she would be okay with that, but I don't know what the board's feeling is on that.
My concern is, Kathy Julian for the record, my concern is this, and I speak of this as a resident of the codes, the STR codes have been discussed and vetted with the public, with comment coming in from various parties of various interests. This has been a process, and as you saw, it went from 3 to 6 now to 4. With, I'm going to say, heroic effort by the county, who is understaffed to enforce these things. And until recently, under budgeted, because it appeared, as per, I think last year, they had a review of the fees being collected. They weren't actually covering the cost of implementing this program. So it worries me if we start taking this apart and do case-by-case exceptions if there is a genuine issue, and perhaps the 5-person thing is a genuine issue, it should go back for discussion at the community level, and then the code should be changed. And so that's what I would recommend, and perhaps that can be done next year. I also feel this acutely because I live in a condo area where our parking is extremely limited as well. So, and I can assure you, this board will have case-by-case appeals coming to it if a precedent is set. So I would say it's good to go back to the community and the various interests to have this discussion with the county and amend the code if needed.
I think you're right. I think we've got enough evidence in front of us, and without opening a can of worms, we can make a decision on this. So, go ahead.
I'd like to comment. I really struggled with this one because I do think this is a difficult issue with code. Don is right, it's clear. B3 says 1 parking space is required for every 4 occupants, but we've got a measurement that takes into account the square footage of the unit itself to start at your number of occupants, but it can then be limited by the number of parking spaces. So if I'm understanding the applicant's request, it's not to utilize the outdoor parking spaces, but it is merely to grant a permit for 5. This board has the authority to do that. I think this is a quirk in code, then I think the code's going to get updated. So I would be comfortable modifying the decision and not allowing use of the exterior parking spaces, but granting a permit for 5 occupants.
Leo Harishny, for the record. I understand your perspective on this, but as I read the applicant's request, it was for 5 occupants and 2 parking spaces. So that is not necessarily what she's asking for is not what you're willing to give. And to me, 4 occupants or 5 occupants isn't really the pivot here. The pivot here is physical parking spaces designated or accessible.
Kathy Julian, for the record. My concern is that the 4 occupants per parking space was something agreed to by the community after prolonged discussion. I can assure you on that. And I would hesitate as a board to start making exceptions to that without going back and making appropriate discussions with the county staff and the community on that issue. Your folks are thinking 5, 4, not a big deal. Trust me, this was a big deal when the STR code was being revised. And it was very contentious. So I think, again, we would be opening a can of worms right now to do that.
Leo Harishny, for the record. Something that the appellant brought up that I am going to, I don't know, that I'm new at this, so I may be putting my foot in my mouth, but I'm going to openly say I have an issue with the idea of, as the appellant stated, that as a private property owner, that their HOAs, regulations, and expectations should be given more weight than the county's regulations and ordinances. And I strongly disagree with that. And I think that if we would be much better if through discussion and public input that any sorts of issues with codes and ordinances, that the county and the larger government bodies, that their decisions and their policies are who we follow and not individual HOAs, whether they're homes or planned communities. So, and that's a soapbox that I'll climb back down off of. You don't want me to get on it.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Don.
For the record, Don Christensen. this, I would like to direct our legal staff. If we allowed, and we have the authority to modify, in this case, the maximum occupancy to 5 instead of the 4, would that apply generally to the statute or the ordinance?
No, what you're deciding right now is whether to modify this case, although certainly you could be setting a precedent insofar as you're not tying it to anything specific to this case, but rather how many people fit in a car. So the code as it exists today reads 1 parking space is required for every 4 occupants. That is county code.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. With that, can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment deny this appeal and affirm the decision of the Washoe County Director of Planning and Building to reduce the appellant's short-term rental occupancy from 6 persons to 4 persons and reduce the parking from 2 spaces to 1 space. Do I read the rest?
Do we read the?
Yes.
No. Yeah.
Okay, a written order of the Board of Adjustment's decision shall be prepared, executed by the Board of Adjustment Chair, and filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and a copy of the order shall be served to the appellant. The appellant has the right to appeal the written order by filing a petition for judicial review in the Second Judicial District Court for the State of Nevada within 25 days from the date of the order. The order is mailed to the appellant. Per WCC Section 110, 910, 15, I-6, when a petition for judicial review is filed, the court rules shall govern the proceeding. The judicial review is in lieu of an appeal to the Board of County Super Commissioners as authorized by NRS 278-310-3B.
Okay, I just got one question for legal on this. I heard somebody say the definition of a parking space is the garage space only, not the tag that even has her number on it, assigning her. Is that your interpretation of the
Per
parking
code,
spot?
the parking spaces are those specifically allocated to a unit.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Leo Russian for the record, I second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. So we have 3 for and 2 against. Okay. Let's, at this time, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Minnesota.
That's another thing about that development, that condo complex. If they're proud and open, discussing the fact that 85% of those units are occupied year-round. Yeah, thank you. And that's a nice, that's and it's a 30, so that's like a 30, almost 4-year-old development. 30-some-odd-year-old.
It's aged well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, it's, my wife and I were like, well, we totally, I put up with an HOA that was here. But,
Too bad I can't afford it.
yeah, oh, yeah. But, why are that many of those units vacant?
I would probably
And that-
dispute some of those stats.
Well, and that's just, as a personal thing, I find that
Large swamp.
troubling.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe not have a rational response to that, but,
Almost went 5 over the 4
right,
until she said applies. It's a precedent.
right, that and the
I'm
fact,
not
well,
going to guide them that.
that and the fact that she said clearly in there she wanted 5 people in 2 spaces, because she was, standing on those 2 parking passes.
HOA would assign. They could sell those tickets.
That's true, that would be the option. Designate,
Guys that serve on the board. If I had a commodity like that that I could sell,
yeah, you have the HOA, put it up to their members, says, are we gonna, let's have that on lottery.
or give a discount to somebody who gives up the space.
But those,
It's fascinating.
but those,
Don't like
those
setting up.
garages are, I guess, not for something like that. No. It's not a hardship.
No. No,
It's not
it's
a
a
day-to-day,
business.
yes.
It's
Yeah.
non-corporeal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just business.
And absolutely, I'm not being anti-business by making you jump through hoops. You knew the job was dangerous when you took it.
Can we start early? Is that possible, or do we have to wait? I think we have to wait. David, there's the clock. It says 1:30.
Recording in progress.
All right, let's bring the meeting back to order. It's 3:07. We're on item 10D, case number WVIO PLA 23-0127 Schmidt for 345 Main Street. Mr. Lloyd, will you please announce?
Will do. For possible action, hearing and discussion to affirm, modify, reverse, or remand an administrative hearing officer's order affirming a code enforcement violation of Washoe County Code Section 110-306-35B, outdoor storage of an RV on a vacant residentially zoned property without the required existing principal use. Representing Washoe County in this matter is Planning Manager Chad Geisinger.
All right, Chad, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Board of Adjustment members. Chad Giesinger, Planning Manager for Community Services Department, for the record. This is appeal case WVIO-PLA-0127. This is an appeal of an administrative hearing office decision. And before I get into my presentation in earnest, I did want to provide some brief background to the board, because this is, like the last item, this is kind of a unique item that the board doesn't hear very often. So I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of the process and how this works. Washoe County has adopted what's called an administrative enforcement process, and those regulations are contained in Chapter 125 of the County Code. And this process was created to create an administrative hearing office that would hear appeals to keep from cluttering up, for example, the Board of Adjustments agendas and so forth, because all code enforcement cases have due process and appeal rights. So the way this works is a penalty notice, if there's a violation observed by a code enforcement official and they have grounds to warrant issuing a violation notice, that penalty can be appealed to the administrative hearing office, and the hearing officer either affirms or dismisses the subject violation based on the evidence presented. And so that has occurred in this case already. There's already been one hearing. And the appellant chose to appeal the decision to the Board of Adjustment, which is the process. And the BOA decision hears these, and you either find that the hearing officer decision was valid, or you can rule that you feel that the hearing officer reached an improper decision. If you deny the appeal, this decision, unlike other decisions, because it's part of an administrative enforcement proceeding where it's already gone to administrative hearing, the next step in the process would be to judicial review per the code citation presented right there, 110.910.15 D&I. Okay, there we go. Okay. So to get into the case background, the subject property is in downtown Gerlach at 345 Main Street. It is a 0.23 acre property, so fairly small property. and the appellant happens to own the adjacent parcel at 335 Main Street as well, which will become relevant later in my presentation. And I would like to note here, just based on some of the public comment I heard at the last hearing where this item was continued, there was an assertion that, what's the big deal about this violation? It's 100 miles north of Reno. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But I would just like to remind the board that all citizens of Washoe County deserve code enforcement resources. They all pay taxes that support our salaries, and a violation in Gerlach is no different than a violation in Reno or in Incline Village or in Envia. If we get a complaint, we're going to investigate it. And if that investigation reveals a code violation, then we will engage in administrative enforcement. So just wanted to put that on the record. So here is a depiction of where the property is specifically located in the town of Gerlach. You see it's pretty much right in downtown Gerlach there. And this case began with an anonymous complaint. We do not know who the complainant was. That was received all the way back in September of 2023, so we're going on almost a year now that this case has been going on. The complaint alleged the storage of bikes and junk on a vacant parcel. It alleged RV living and operating a business without a business license, and I think that was related to the sale of bikes after Burning Man. But upon field investigation, the CEO confirmed that there were in fact numerous bikes and 2 RVs being stored on the property, but there was no evidence of business activity currently occurring. The subject parcel does not have an established principal use. In other words, it does not have a house, it does not have a business, it's vacant. And storage on a vacant parcel is not allowed pursuant to Washoe County Code 110-306-35B. And that is the violation. So here is what the code enforcement officer discovered upon investigation. You can see the presence of all the bikes and the 2 RVs. Here's an aerial photo of the subject parcel outlined in blue. As you can see at that time, some of the site had been cleaned up. It looks like the bikes were kind of piled against the fence that runs along the property line there. And so every code enforcement case begins, if the enforcement official who's been empowered to make this determination, if the enforcement official determines there is a violation of the code, the process starts with a warning. So code enforcement doesn't go straight to a civil fine. In almost all instances, we don't have to provide 30 days, but we almost always do provide 30 days. We can't provide more than 30 days on a warning. And that's to give the respondent, is what the person is called when there's a potential violation. It gives the respondent a chance to understand the violation and what the potential remedies are and to actually engage in those remedies. The code enforcement official also has the authority to issue extension of time if there's progress being made towards compliance. And in this case, that actually did occur. Upon reinspection of the property, all the bikes have been removed, which we appreciated. However, there was still one remaining RV, and that's pictured in the lower right-hand corner. So a new compliance date was set for a month out to remove the remaining RV, so there was another 30 days provided. Upon reinspection on December 4th, the RV was still there as pictured, and so a first penalty notice was issued. So as I mentioned earlier, all respondents have appeal rights when they receive a penalty notice, and that's clearly spelled out in the notice that is provided. And in this case, the appellant chose to appeal the penalty notice to the Administrative Hearing Office. The case was originally scheduled for February 16th. However, at the request of the appellant, that hearing was ultimately, after much back and forth, was ultimately rescheduled to April 5th. And that meeting was held in person at the district court in downtown Reno. After a very long meeting, 5-hour hearing, they're only supposed to go 1, by the way, Administrative Hearing Officer did confirm the violation based on the evidence presented at the testimony and issued an administrative order. The administrative order required the payment of the enforcement fine, so the first penalty fine is $100, and then there's a $50 hearing fee if you lose the case before the hearing office, and ordered removal of the RV by June 30th, which we're well past now because of continuances, or they could simply record a deed restriction pursuant to 110-306-15B, which I will describe in more detail in the following slides. Instead of doing either of those things, the appellant, as is their right, appealed the order to the Board of Adjustment, and so that's why this is before you today. So here is the specific code provision that's being violated. Outdoor storage on vacant lots is prohibited without an existing principal use. And storage is defined as the placement of items outside for more than 72 consecutive hours. The RV has been there since at least April. So in order to comply with code, again, the RV needs to either be removed or a principal use established. However, there is one additional remedy pursuant to 110-306-15B, and that is the recordation of a deed restriction. And the key here is that in order to have storage on an adjacent lot, they have to be contiguous, under the same ownership, and under the same regulatory zone. And so what the deed restriction would do, it would allow that RV to be on that parcel without a principal use. Here is the specific language of 315B, proposed accessory structure or use, and in this case it's a use because there's storage there. If it's under the same ownership and so forth, as I previously mentioned. But what I wanted to point out here was that highlighted area in either lot can be sold separately until the accessory structure or use is removed, terminated, or the nonconformance is rectified. And the goal of that policy is a public policy, is to try to reduce the proliferation of vacant lots that have, say, a garage or car containers, or someone had their junk cars parked on it at one point because they had two contiguous parcels, and then they sell one parcel, and then that other parcel now is just sitting there vacant. So that's the goal of the public policy goal of this deed restriction process. So the deed restriction simply indemnifies the county against that from happening. And so in order for the deed restriction to be removed, it's very simple. You establish a principal use, or you remove the item that's in nonconformance, which in this case would be the stored item. So Mr. Schmidt is eligible to meet that criteria. As you can see here, the subject property outlined in red, and then the adjacent parcel owned by Mr. Schmidt is outlined in blue. It does have a house and a principal use, and both these properties do have the same regulatory zone, and they are in the same ownership. However, instead of pursuing the deed restriction remedy, which would be very simple and straightforward and not take much time at all, the appellant continued to argue that they shouldn't have to do that. And part of their argument was based on an old interpretation from 1996 that basically allowed a garage to be built to fulfill the parking requirement for a single-family house on an adjacent parcel if it was contiguous. Interpretations are issued when there's some ambiguity in a code provision, and is to provide clarity to the staff when processing applications. As I mentioned, these deed restrictions are not onerous. They're easily removed by either removing the nonconformance or establishing a principal use. Regarding public notice, that's not required for these proceedings. So none of the surrounding neighbors, and obviously the complainant wasn't noticed either because they're anonymous. So the only noticing requirement was to notice the violator, the appellant, and that due process has been provided. I know the board is used to making findings on the items that come before you. This item does not require specific findings. However, the code does state that decisions of a hearing officer are presumed to be reasonable and lawful, and it is the burden of the appellant to persuade the board otherwise. If the appeal is denied, staff is recommending that the BOA include a compliance plan. So for example, remove the RV or record the deed restriction that would legalize it by a certain date. The appeal window after this BOA item is 25 days to petition for judicial review. And if it's denied, a written order of the BOA decision will be prepared. That compliance plan date will be put in that order, and it will be served on the appellant. So staff is recommending, based on the evidence, that the board deny the appeal and uphold the administrative order that was issued, and also establish a comply-by date, since the original comply-by date of the administrative order was June 30th, so we're well past that. And here is a possible motion for your consideration. This is also contained in your staff report, and I can toggle back to this if needed, but that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Great, thank you. Would the appellant like to make a presentation at this time?
Yeah, up there.
Whenever you're ready, please state your name for the record.
On, turn it off. For the record, we're on. Gary Schmidt. First of all, I'd like to state that there's two issues, peripheral issues here. One is the appeal. State law provides that any decision here today can be appealed either to district court or to the county commission. You have in your packet a legal opinion in that regards, so that's an issue that we won't deal with today, but we'll deal in a different forum. Also, I mentioned earlier there's been multiple open meeting law complaints filed, which will be dealt with probably in the Attorney General's office or in district court. For Ms. Julian, I hope you have the respect for the code that you expressed in the last hearing, because this is quite a simple matter. And what I'm doing here today is what I've been doing in this county for 50 years, protecting the rights, the rule of law, and the rights of the citizens. And what we have here is a grandfathering issue. And we also have an issue of the Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution, dealing with you shall pass no ex post facto laws. That's on which the grandfathering concept is based. You can't allow something at one period of time and then take that away because you pass a new law, generally speaking, unless you pay for it by condemnation. Now, I'd like to read my suggested motion. You have a copy of it. I'll just pass it out. I move that, after reasonable consideration, that the property at 345 Main Street in Gerlach legally establish the use of storage prior to the changes in the county code adopted on August 19th, 2016, based upon the definition of parcel of land in the development code up until that time, which would include both 335 Main Street and 345 Main Street being combined units of land defined as a single parcel having a primary use as a residence. I further move that as of August 19th, 2016, when the definition of parcel of land in the development code changed to conform with the definition long used by the assessor's office, and those two individual units of land, 335 and 345 Main Street, became separate parcels, the use of storage at 345 Main Street became a legal non-conforming use. This legal non-conforming use, commonly called grandfathering, of storage can continue on 345 Main Street until such time as the storage ceases for a 12-month period or the property is sold to another party and the two properties no longer have common ownership. You go to 110, 904, 10, and 20 for the issues on the grandfathering or non-conforming uses. I'm assuming you're all a lot more familiar with that than the administrative hearing judge was. She did not have a grasp of that at all. Now, to further clarify, what we're looking at, if you go to page 19 in your big packet, most of the stuff I passed out here is duplicates of what's in your big packet. I just gave you extra copies because those are pages I'm going to be referring to, so you don't have to leaf through a hard copy or search for your computer. But on page 19, this is part of the order of the administrative judge. In paragraph 1, it says, although testimony and evidence were presented indicating use of the subject parcel prior and after 2016, this was insufficient to prove that there was ongoing storage on the subject parcel, but rather speculation and snapshots in time. And paragraph 5 of that order. Although respondent offered arguments, and there may be some substance warranting further research into respondents' assertions regarding history, interpretations, and legal meanings of lot and parcel to establish legal nonconforming use or grandfathering, there was not enough evidence to rebut petitioner's evidence that there had been a violation, et cetera, et cetera. I think I taught the administrative hearing judge everything she now knows about grandfathering. She almost ruled in my favor here, but she didn't quite get there because, as she states, not enough evidence. Well, if you look in your packet, and I've given you another copy of it, one of the things to establish a grandfathering is that the use, a legal use before it becomes an illegal or non-conforming use. And that would be on August 19th of 2016, and it's in your packet there, the staff report, the proposed ordinance, or the adopted ordinance. What that did, prior to that, the definition of parcel in the development code was one or more contiguous pieces, units of land under the control or ownership of one person. You look at the map here, there's 2 contiguous units of land. They were owned by me prior to 2016, actually from 2012. They're under one ownership. So the development code defined this entire area here as a parcel of land by the definition in the development code that's also in your big packet. Up until August 19th of 2016. Then they changed the definition of parcel, and they made some other modifications to the code. But they changed the definition of the parcel to conform with what the assessor has always said is a parcel. It's a piece of property that's got a parcel number. Pretty easy definition. That was not the definition in Washoe County for half of a century, up until August 19th of 2016. Now, to go evidence, so to establish grandfathering, we have to determine that legal storage occurred on that property prior to August 19th of 2016. You have a statement from Jeannie Herman, the commissioner from District 5, who visits that Gerlach sometimes monthly or bi-monthly, several times a year. And she's been visiting it, Gerlach, since she was elected in 14. The code changed in 16. And she attests there, affirms that she knows that property well. I've known Jeannie for 25 years. That there was always something stored on that property whenever she was in Gerlach. She also states that in actuality, it's one of the cleanest properties in Gerlach. That's not relevant, a little sidebar thing though, that goes to the abusive nature of this filing. So there's your evidence that, plus you have my testimony, it's all over the transcripts, the 200 pages of transcripts from the 5-hour hearings, that I visit my property regularly, and I know there's always been something stored on both these units of land since I've owned it and before I owned it. I was familiar with it for 10 years before I owned it. There was always stuff on that property. So that satisfies the provision for grandfathering that you've established a legal use prior to. Now, the only other thing you have to do is look at the definition. It's all over the staff report. It's cited numerous times. But again, the definition in the development code up until August 19th of 2016 was one or more contiguous units of land in the possession of, or it's titled to one person. that fits the definition. So what happened, they changed the definition on August 19, 2016, and now it becomes 2 parcels of land because they changed the definition of parcel. So now it goes from a legal conforming use, the storage on this portion here, it goes from legal conforming to legal non-conforming. And the grandfathering laws clearly state that use can continue until such time as it ceases for a 12-month period, or the property is sold and therefore they're not under common ownership. That's one of the conditions. So again, you have Jeannie's testimony and my testimony in that regards. And again, I want to read into the record what should be your motion today. I move that after reasonable consideration that the property at 345 Main Street in Gerlach legally establish the use of storage prior to the changes in the county code adopted on August 19, 2016, based upon the definition of parcel of land in the development code up and until that time, which would include both 335 Main Street, 345 Main Street, being combined units of land defined as a parcel having a primary use of a residence. So just to be clear, there is a primary use right there. So having established that and having weighed the testimony of the county commissioner from District 5, my testimony, and other testimony at the administrative hearings office about the continual storage on that property, I think this is a very simple matter that has been made quite complex by the bureaucracy of Washoe County. And I'd like to reserve my 3.5 minutes for further comments, depending on discussion from the board.
Can you do that now, please? We're giving you 15 minutes right now, and then we're going to have the public comment after. So if you want to do your public comment right now, please do. I'll give you another 30 seconds on the clock.
Well, no,
This is your time, sir. This is your time to speak. You can't do a second public comment.
Okay. Well, you can, but that's all right. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, we're not at the question part yet, sir.
Well, let me add one thing. You know, I'm not only fighting to preserve and reserve the rights for grandfathering throughout the community, but especially in specific relation to this unique thing about contiguous properties owned by one person. The opinion rendered by Mike Harper in 1996, I was involved in that. I'm the longtime owner of the Reindeer Lodge. I was all over his dissertation revolving that, because the Reindeer Lodge is on 5 parcels. They're all contiguous. They're all owned by me. And the primary use is the building, the lodge. That's on one of the 5 parcels. I have all kinds of accessory uses, like storage, like snowmobiling rentals, like horseback riding, like outdoor concerts, like flea markets, that go on all 5 of the parcels, not just the parcel that the primary use is on, the lodge. So the issue, I'm one of the persons that raised the issue or got involved in the issue, because if you listen to the arguments of staff here, the Reindeer Lodge has to confine its accessory uses to the one unit of land that the primary use is on. But the law doesn't say that. The law didn't say that up until 16. The law defined those 5 units of land up there, all in my name, as a parcel. Therefore, I had those accessory uses all over that property. And the GID's property adjacent would be, whoops, right there. Why is the map not up?
Put it back on. I stopped your time. So
There's 2 units owned by the GID. They have a building on one, which is their primary use. And the other, they store stuff all the time. There's at least, I would say, 8 or 10 situations just in Gerlach where you have properties, 2 units of land owned by the same person, side by side, and the primary use is on one of the units of land, and they use the other for whatever. Roger could testify. He had a neighbor that had 2 units of land. He had his house on one, and had a horse corral on the other one for 30 years. I mean, this is common throughout the county. Now, they changed it a little bit more in August of 2016. They said it can continue. But from that point forward, if you establish a use, you have to file a deed restriction. Well, I didn't establish the use from that point forward. I established it prior to that. So, having established a legal conforming use prior to August of 2016 and continued it, it's grandfathered. It's simply a matter of the code. If you look at it, it's quite a simple matter that somebody has blown into 500 pages of exhibits, and it wasn't me. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, do we have any public comment? I'd like to open up public comment.
I have Roger Edwards.
Good afternoon, Roger Edwards for the record. I know this property, is my mic on? I've known this property intimately. I've been up there several times from 2008 on. I was involved with the bicycle disaster every year. But what you're seeing is a lot that's been cleaned up from that mess of 200 bicycles. But Gary doesn't sell those bicycles. He gives them to the Boy Scouts and everybody else. He takes donations, but he doesn't sell anything off that lot. And look how clean it is now. It's one of the cleanest lots in that picture. This is the biggest nothing burger I've ever seen. $100 violation. He owns more property in Gerlach than Gerlach does. He is the salt of the earth for that town, and for the county to hassle him over a $100 violation just doesn't make any sense. Come on, folks. It's all a matter of how you discuss parcels, lots, and so forth, and he's got you, you know. I've got credentials. I've been there, been here, been there. And I don't know, this should be remanded or demanded, whatever you call it, and just let this thing go away and die. He's just taking you guys' time for, and you know, he could give you that money without even knowing it, and but he won't, and he shouldn't. Parcels, lots, come on. Continuous property, he owns them both. He's a public servant like you and I are. Come on. Thank you.
There's no further public comment in chambers, and I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Okay, we'll close down public comment. Bring it back to... I need legal, is that, can he do a public comment after? Okay, all right, you go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Counselor. A little more background information. I do lecture throughout the state on the open meeting law and the public records law, and that's one she got right. The 15 minutes was my presentation, but I'm still entitled, as anybody's entitled, to 3 minutes of public comment. And hopefully I won't take the 3 minutes, but let me just clarify something about the bicycles. The bicycles are not there for a short period of time, and I'll correct one thing that Roger said. Some of the bicycles do get sold a lot of them, or most of them, are given away, a lot of them to the community of Gerlach. And generally, I'm not the one that's selling them. There are other people that have got the temporary license for Burning Man that have sometimes on my property and sometimes elsewhere that sell those bicycles that, you know, burners on their way out that didn't plan well ahead and didn't have their bicycle. So, but I don't generally receive any money for that. It's just a good place for them to drop off bicycles because people are not taking that bicycle on the plane back to Australia. And it's better that they be recycled than they go in a dumpster somewhere. So it's not a business per se. On occasion, it's a business, but those people get permits, you know, to sell the bicycles. During the Burning Man period, it's a temporary special events permit you get. But again, I hope you all had the time to read Ms. Herman's statement. Again, I'd like to point out those 2 parcels there owned by the GID, and just wrap back into, you've heard a little bit earlier today about, this all started when myself and half the town of Gerlach signed a petition, and we stopped the GGID from going into the development business, you know, in competition with the private sector, in violation of state law and their own charter. That's a done deal. The county was a co-conspirator in that, so the county's not happy with me either, because I caught the county, principally Dave Solero, with his hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. So that's where this all started. But if this is not granted, you might see hundreds of cases like this coming before you, and it's a real challenge to grandfathering. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no further public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for questions of the applicant or the appellate. Yeah. Go ahead, yeah, yeah, staff, yeah.
My question is for Mr. Geisinger. We're talking about, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but we're going to either uphold or modify the administrative order by the law judge. And because Mr. Schmidt made that a part of his presentation, the entire, actually it was edited. There's about 3 hours of testimony that I observed, and I watched every minute of it. And one thing that came up, and he really didn't make this statement today, but he has on the record, and I want your opinion on this. Help me out. The administrative order to modify the deed restriction, if you will. He alleges that that would affect his property value. And I don't think you're stepping too far out of your authority by telling me what, let me put it another way. My belief is that a deed restriction in itself is not detrimental to a property value. It's the condition of the property. It's the violation. And frankly, I think and I'll give you credit for it, your solution to this whole thing, very elegant, and it affects his property value. It can be easily remedied. We're not violating his record. So am I incorrect in that it's a fairly easy process to remove a deed restriction?
In my view, That's correct. It is easy. In fact, all he has to do is pull the RV over to his other parcel, and now the parcel will be in compliance. And as far as the valuation argument, that's really kind of a red herring because the property owner could make it a conforming lot prior to listing the property, so there shouldn't be any devaluation. If there were devaluation, it would be because they didn't record or they didn't remove the deed restriction. And like you say, the property would probably be more valuable if it didn't have a unregistered RV parked on it. So yes, I would agree that it is easy for that deed restriction to be removed should the property be brought into conformance. And then it could be listed and sold as one,
Okay.
as a piece of land.
Thank you. That
Yeah.
really answers that question. I just want to add that in my observation in that lengthy, highly repetitive hearing, I must compliment you as a representative of this department. Showed great restraint in conducted yourself in a very professional manner, and you have today, and I really appreciate it. This thing kind of charged with all kinds of emotion, and I do compliment you and your staff. I don't remember the gentleman's name, the actual...
Mr. Farmer.
Farmer. You might pass that along, that at least in one person's opinion, conducted yourself very admirably, and I appreciate it very much. It makes our job a lot easier. I think that's the only question I had for you, is the ease in which a deed restriction can be removed. And I thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the compliment.
Chad, I got a question for you while you're there. When was the first time that an RV or something was noticed by the county where we have visual proof?
Well, this only was on the code enforcement radar once we received the complaint. So the program is complaint-driven, and so yes, there very well may be other properties in Gerlach that might not be in compliance. We get complaints on those, we'll investigate them. In fact, Mr. Schmidt filed several complaints about properties in Gerlach, and they were all investigated.
Right.
You know, so we know it's been there since, I think, since April 2023, but code enforcement had not been investigating or paying any attention until we received the complaint in September of 23.
So we don't have any physical evidence that there was something possibly on it before that in 22, 21, 20?
I have aerial photo history of the parcel dating back to 2011. I can't remember if I included that in the staff report or not. I believe I did. You know, so those are snapshot in time, and over various aerial photos, you'll see that it was vacant. Other times it had stuff stored on it.
So it wasn't continuously occupied.
Right. Well, and the other issue is the grandfather, the non-conforming part of it, or even the interpretation. The interpretation didn't talk about uses like storage. It talked about establishing a garage, and again, the purpose for that was to meet the parking standard for a single-family house. Right. Yeah. So
what would is it even possible for someone to take two lots or remove the center line and make it into one lot?
Yeah. Yes, it's called a reversion to acreage. That's also a possibility, a remedy. Yeah.
That's a remediation. Okay. And then, yeah, that's so first, all right. Does anybody else got any questions? I got to think of how I'm going to phrase this. Go ahead.
I think I have a question. So with the way the deed restriction works, the concept behind it is to keep a property owner from, let me say, selling off the piece of the parcel with the home on it, the principal use, and then having that vacant lot be essentially a dump yard.
Right, be a standalone parcel at that point.
Right.
It wouldn't be contiguous to anything. Right.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that's the concept of the deed restriction, to keep essentially a junkyard from being created in the middle of a town. And so the deed restriction says, hey, if you're going to sell the principal use, you need to clean up that vacant property.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the concept behind the deed restriction. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay. Do anything, Peter?
Peter Gishan for the record. Candidly, I don't know that I find the fact pattern to work, but can someone give us an opinion of grandfathering? If the fact pattern were perfect, could he avail himself of grandfathered status and be non-conforming but legal?
In my view, no, because that was never a legal use to have storage on a vacant lot. And they've
But
always
again,
been
if
two
the
parcels.
fact pattern were correct,
The fact pattern, what do you mean?
I think I agree with you that the old statute refers to accessory buildings, garages, not RVs.
Right.
But if we were talking about an accessory structure, could we avail ourselves of some sort of grandfathering status?
If there was a legally established use prior to a change in the code, that's when you get legal nonconforming status. And then that status cannot cease for more than 12 months. In this case, no one can prove definitively that something didn't cease. And in any event, that storage wasn't allowed anyways. Under the code, it never has been.
Right.
I mean, ever since the original code in 57, you couldn't have storage on a vacant parcel.
But it has to be maintained continuously for 12 months?
If you have a legal nonconforming
If you have a legal
use.
nonconforming use.
Yeah, you can't let it be discontinued for more than 12 months.
Okay.
Can I follow, Kathy, can I follow up on that? So if there had been a garage, an accessory garage on that property, then the grandfathering argument would be valid?
If you're basing that on the 96-4 interpretation, that the garage was established legally under that interpretation, then yes, I would say that would be the case.
Okay,
Yeah.
but there wasn't a garage. Okay, thank you.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, oh, sorry,
No.
So, Chad, real quick, based on the grandfathering argument here, I want to make sure I word this correctly. Like in the last case, the codes changed at a certain year. Could she have used the grandfathering clause to keep the occupancy at 5, 6? I mean, just because the code changes, if she claimed a
Well,
grandfathering clause?
In the case of an STR permit, though, it's got to be renewed annually, so that's a different scenario. So when it gets renewed, that's when the parking got reduced. I know we're getting off the topic of the agenda item, but
Right.
yeah, legal nonconforming can be a pretty complicated issue.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so especially when it comes to businesses and things of that nature.
Right. All right, it's not just that simple, so you have something and because they changed the law down the road that you get to claim.
Well, again, the
grandfathering.
law didn't really change. The law has always prohibited storage on a vacant lot.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
because storage is a use.
okay.
Yeah.
So I think we are here today to affirm, affirm, modify, or reverse the remand of an administrative hearing officer's order affirming a code enforcement violation of Washoe County Code Section 110-306-35B, which is outdoor storage of an RV, which showed up in 2023. We have no proof there was anything there before that visually, and on a vacant residential zone property without the required existing principal use. If I'm correct, there's a $150 fine, and there is a ask for a title designation, a title change to allow something like that on there. Is that correct? So the title change would be what again? I'm sorry. It would be a,
I'm not following you. A compliance plan, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah. So instead of just saying I'm upholding the hearing, because if you uphold the hearing order, that actually required the thing to be removed in June 30th, right? Because the hearing was in April, so it gave them time to comply. But then all these appeals and continuances happened. So all I'm asking there is, instead of leaving it open-ended, just establish a date.
Put a date on
Yeah.
there. Okay.
So it could be 25 days from the written decision being rendered,
Okay.
for example.
All right.
Yeah. Or you could choose a different date, but that's what I'm recommending.
Okay. Legal, do you have anything to add to this or anything?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or discussion?
I do. I don't mean to lengthen this hearing any further, but we're really impressed with the fact that I witnessed the proceedings of the hearing officer. And I was very, very impressed with the professionalism of that. In my prior real-life job, I presented cases in front of an administrative law judge, just very similar to this in my activities for the state tax department.
Member Christensen, please speak into your mic.
No.
Into the microphone. Thank you.
Anyway, so I have reviewed, based on my history of presenting cases in an administrative law setting, I think what we're being asked here is, do we have a defect in what was presented and what was decided by the hearing officer? And keep it really simple. I found absolutely no defect in the hearing officer's deliberation or decision, and exhibited by running 5 times the allotted 1 hour for the hearing, I think showed exceptional fairness to the appellant. So, having said that, I find absolutely no defect in the process. And the process, if you simplify it, do we affirm the hearing officer, and he still has recourse? My goodness, take it to the Supreme Court if we had to. My point being is, how do we, as this board, how do we feel about, were there defects in that hearing, and do we step up and say, remand again, or deny the, or to allow the
Judgment.
judgment as written? And I found it very complete and very compelling. So having said that,
I think it's pretty obvious to me that the action by the code enforcement officer was appropriate. So I would entertain a motion if anybody had one, unless we have some more discussion.
well, I would
Go ahead.
offer the motion. I move that, for the record, Don Christensen, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment deny this appeal and affirm the decision of the administrative hearing officer, including, number 1, upholding that the appellant is in violation of Washoe County Code Section 110.306.35B, and 2, upholding the hearing officer's order to either remove the subject RV from the property or file a deed restriction. Number 3, upholding the hearing officer's affirmation of the $100 penalty and $50 administrative action fee. And 4, authorizing the chair of the Board of Adjustment to prepare a written order of the decision and file it with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, a copy of which shall be served to the appellant.
And then Chad asked if we could put all items to be done by a date.
Thank you. What was the suggested date, Chad?
25 days.
25
Is that
days.
right?
Correct, 25 days, because that's the length of the appeal period of addition for judicial review.
Okay. In addition to what I just read, I move that compliance occur in the next 25-day period.
Okay.
From the judicial decision, right?
From our
No,
decision.
from
our
today,
decision.
from
From
today.
tomorrow's date, starting forward.
Yes, from this date.
Do I have a second?
Leo Harishian for the record. I second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Can you please read the appeal procedure, Mr. Webb?
All right, a written order of the Board of Adjustment's decision shall be prepared, executed by the Board of Adjustment Chair, and filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and a copy of the order shall be served on the appellant. The appellant has the right to appeal the written order by filing a petition for judicial review in the Second Judicial District Court for the State of Nevada within 25 days from the date the order is mailed to the appellant per Washoe County Code Section 110-910-15, sub I-6. When a petition for judicial review is filed, the court rules shall govern the proceeding. This judicial review is in lieu of an appeal to the Board of County Commissioners as authorized by NRS 278-310-3B.
All right, thank you. That brings us on to item number 11, chair and board items. Anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to have on there? No? Request for information from staff. Any information requests? No? Okay, report from previous Board of Adjustment items. Mr. Lloyd?
Yeah, I have one item. You may remember the Collier special use permit that was up in Crystal Bay at 425 Pahoot. And that item was appealed and will be heard by the County Commission at their August 20th meeting. And that's all I have to report on.
All right, legal? Anything from legal?
Nothing, thank you.
All right, let's open up general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
I have Gary Schmidt.
For the record, Gary Schmidt reminding Mr. Kissinger, who left the room, that giving false testimony at a public hearing can be punished by up between 1 and 5 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. He gave false testimony again here today when he said that storage was never allowed on a vacant lot. Now, what I was cited for was Section 10-306-35. That's what it was, citation. Reading it for you. Outdoor storage on vacant lots. That's a title. It doesn't go to the meaning of the body. You go to the meaning of the body to get to your meaning. That's a description. The title has a form of a description. No outdoor storage shall occur on a vacant parcel without an existing principal use. Could I have this map up, please? Prior to 2016, that was the parcel. That's the primary use. Storage was legal on there up until 16, legal conforming. Afterwards, it should have been grandfathered. Reminding you, you've made a gross error here. You didn't even look at what the citation was for. The citation was for, doesn't have anything to do with an RV. The RV's irrelevant. It's just something that's being stored, like a 2x4 or a cement mixer or a bicycle or anything else. The issue I was cited for was illegal storage. And it's an erroneous citation. No outdoor storage shall occur on a vacant parcel without an existing principal use. There's the principal use. There's the parcel. It was well established up till 16 by Jeannie Herman's testimony, if you would, in writing, and it's continued since then. So it's a non-conforming legal use, grandfathered. And reminding you all voted to deny the appeal. So any one of you can ask for a reconsideration of this matter. And I challenge you to search your conscience. Read the citation. I'll read it to you one more time. No outdoor storage shall occur on a vacant parcel without an existing principal use. You have the definition of parcel up till 16. It's one or more contiguous pieces. There's the parcel. There's the use. Storage was legal there and there. It was established legal use. I strongly suggest and advise that several of you request a rehearing in this matter and you read the documentation a little better next time.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comment?
No further public comment in chambers or Zoom.
All right, with that, it's 4:05. We'll adjourn. Thank you.